तपाईहरु हेर्दै हुनुहुन्छ गुड मर्निङ नेपाल।
गुड मर्निङ नेपाल।
गुड मर्निङ नेपाल।
नमस्कार, गुड मर्निङ नेपाल। सधैँ बिहानी सो गुड मर्निङ नेपालमा म तपाईहरुको होस्ट डाक्टर सन्तोष उपाध्याय आज पनि उपस्थित भइसकेको छु। र तपाईलाई एउटा कुरा अचम्म लाग्न सक्छ, आज पहिलो दिन गुड मर्निङ नेपालमा किन चाहिँ हामीले एकजना मात्रै होस्ट देखिराखेका छौँ त। र यसको एउटा प्रसङ्ग जोड्नु पर्दाखेरि के छ भने अहिले काठमाडौँमा फैलिराखेको डेङ्गु पनि यसको एउटा कारक तत्त्व हो। किनभने हाम्रो को होस्ट प्रियालाई पनि डेङ्गुले सङ्क्रमण भइसकेको कारणले गर्दाखेरि आज उहाँ हामीमाझ उपस्थित हुनुहुन्न, तर उहाँलाई शीघ्र स्वास्थ्य लाभको कामना र यो कामना गर्दा गर्दै मैले एउटा कुरा के पनि रियलाइज गरेँ भने यो लामो समयसम्म त मैले डेङ्गुको बारेमा चर्चा गरेकै रहेनछु। आखिर के हो त डेङ्गु भनेको? डेङ्गु भनेको एडिस इजिप्टस भन्ने एउटा मच्छरले सार्ने भाइरल रोग हो। र भाइरल रोग भन्दै गर्दाखेरि म तपाईहरुलाई भाइरल रोगको कमन सिम्पटम्सहरु पनि आज भन्नेछु भने एडिसको विशेष गरी के लक्षणहरु हुन्छन् र तपाई अहिले कसरी सजग हुनुपर्छ भन्ने बारे पनि चर्चा गर्नेछु। सुरुमा त एडिस मस्किटो भनेको यसले राति नटोक्ने मच्छर हो। अलि अरूभन्दा अलि फरक छ। यसले बिहान र बेलुकीको समयमा बढी टोक्ने गर्दछ र यसले जुन भाइरस हाम्रोमा ट्रान्समिट गरिदिन्छ त्यो भाइरसले पनि अरू भाइरसको जस्तै हाम्रो शरीरमा पसिसकेपछि आफ्नो रेप्लिकेसन गर्न थाल्छ। भनाइको अर्थात् के भने जब मच्छरले हामीलाई टोक्छ अथवा कुनै पनि प्रजातिले हामीलाई टोकिसकेपछि हामीलाई ज्वरो आउने भनेको के हो त, कसरी ज्वरो आउँछ भन्ने बारे बुझ्न जरुरी छ। र आज भाइरल फिभरको कुरा गर्दै गर्दाखेरि कुनै पनि भाइरस हाम्रो शरीरमा छिरिसकेपछि त्यो भाइरसले आफ्ना मल्टिपल रिप्लिकेसन्सहरू गर्न थाल्छ। र एकदमै सुन्दर रमाइलो लाग्ने कुरा हास्यास्पद पनि छ। कुनै पनि भाइरसले मेरो शरीरमा मानव मलाई एउटा मच्छरले टोक्यो र मेरो शरीरमा डेङ्गु भाइरस पसिसकेपछि त्यो भाइरसले म भित्र जान्छु, त्यसपछि आफ्नो रेप्लिकेसन बनाउँछु, मलाई चाहिने खाद्यान्नहरू चाहिन सक्छ भनेर बोकेर त आएको हुँदैन। भनेपछि त्यसले कहाँबाट चाहिँ आफ्नो रेप्लिकेसन बनाउँछ? मानव मेरो शरीरमा 10 वटा भाइरस पसेको छ भने त्यसका लाखौं सङ्ख्यामा भाइरसहरू कसरी बन्छन् त? त्यो बन्नका लागि त्यसले मेरै शरीरको प्रोटिन, मेरै शरीरको ग्लुकोज र मेरै शरीरको पानी प्रयोग गरेर आफ्नो रेप्लिकेसन गर्न थाल्छ। भनाइको अर्थात् मेरो शरीरको प्रोटिन युज हुनु भनेको के हो त? मेरो मांसपेशीमा भएको प्रोटिनहरू भाइरसले युज गर्न थाल्छ। मेरो शरीरको पानी भनेको पनि मेरो शरीरमा मसँग भएको सेलुलर वाटर होला अथवा प्लाज्मामा भएको पानी होला, त्यो पनि उसले आफ्नो रेप्लिकेसनमा प्रयोग गर्न थाल्छ। र साथसाथै यसका लागि आवश्यक पर्ने सम्पूर्ण इनर्जी पनि भाइरसले मेरो शरीरबाट नै युज गर्छ। अब यो भन्दै गर्दाखेरि तपाईले अनुमान लाउन सक्नुहुन्छ डेङ्गु फिभरमा किन चाहिँ हातखुट्टाहरू दुख्ने, मासु दुख्ने, अझै विशेष गरी हड्डीसम्म दुख्ने किसिमको पेन हुन्छ त? किनभने यसले हाम्रै शरीरको मासुमा भएको प्रोटिन युज गरिराखेको हुन्छ, जसले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो मसलहरू विक हुन्छ र हाम्रो शरीरमा प्रोटिनको मात्रा पनि घट्दै गइराखेको हुन्छ। र यसका साथसाथै यसले हाम्रो शरीरकै पानी युज गर्ने भएको भएर हामी डिहाइड्रेटेड पनि हुन्छौँ। र डिहाइड्रेटेड भइसकेपछि डिहाइड्रेसनका सिम्पटम्सहरू के हुन्छ? एउटा त टाउको दुख्ने भइहाल्यो डिहाइड्रेसन हुने बित्तिकै, र यसका सँगै अरू मस्कुलर पेनदेखि लिएर हामीलाई विकनेस फिल गराउने पार्ट पनि यो डिहाइड्रेसनले गराउँछ। र यो सबै कुराहरू हुँदै गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो शरीरमा कहिल्यै पनि आवश्यकभन्दा बढी मेसिनहरू चालु भयो भने, अहिले चाहिँ भाइरस रेप्लिकेसनको मेसिन चालु भइरहेको कारणले गर्दाखेरि यो मेसिन चालु हुँदाखेरि हिट प्रोडक्सन हुन्छ, जसलाई चाहिँ हामीले ज्वरो आउने भन्छौँ। र यसरी ज्वरो आइसकेपछि टाउको दुख्ने, ज्वरो आउने र यो प्रोसेसले गर्दाखेरि वाकवाकी लाग्ने हैन, यस्ता सामान्य लक्षणहरू देखिन थाल्छन्। र यो लक्षणका साथसाथै चाहिँ डेङ्गु अरू रोगभन्दा फरक के छ र अरू भाइरसभन्दा फरक के छ भने डेङ्गुको भाइरसले हाम्रो शरीरमा भएको प्लेटलेट्सको काउन्ट पनि घटाउँदै लैजान्छ। अब तपाईको प्लेटलेट्सको काउन्ट कसरी घटाउँछ भन्ने कुरा पनि महत्त्वपूर्ण छ। डेङ्गुको इन्ट्र्याक्सन नै सुरुमा यो चाहिँ हामीहरूको पेटमा गइसकेपछि रगतमा गइसकेपछि यसले प्लेटलेट्सको काउन्ट घटाउँदै गर्दाखेरि हामीले के औषधि खाने र के नखाने भन्ने कुरा पनि अरू भाइरल रोगभन्दा डेङ्गु भाइरसमा चाहिँ हामीले विशेष सावधानी अपनाउनु पर्ने हुन्छ। जस्तै डेङ्गु भाइरसमा हामीले के भन्छौँ त? सबैले सुनिराख्नु भएको होला। अब लक्षणको कुराहरू हामीले गरिसक्यौँ। टाउको दुख्ने, ज्वरो आउने, वाकवाकी लाग्ने, भोमिटिङ हुने, हातखुट्टाहरू दुख्ने हैन, कमजोरी फिल हुने, यो सबै लक्षणका सँगै चाहिँ कहिलेकाहीँ हातखुट्टामा र्यासेसहरू आउन सक्छ भनेको, बिबिराहरू, राता फोकाहरू देखिन सक्छन्। त्यो र्यासेस भनेको के हो त भनेपछि यो इन्टरनल ब्लिडिङका कारणले गर्दा, सबक्युटेनस ब्लिडिङका कारणले गर्दाखेरि पनि र्यासेस हुन सक्छ। अब प्लेटलेट्स भनेको के हो भने हाम्रो शरीरमा कुनै पनि ठाउँमा रगत आयो अथवा काटियो भने त्यो रगत जमाउने काम चाहिँ प्लेटलेट्सले गर्छ। भनेपछि रगतलाई बाक्लो बनाउने अथवा रगत जमाउने काम चाहिँ प्लेटलेट्सको हो। डेङ्गु फिभरमा प्लेटलेट्सको मात्रा घट्दै जाँदाखेरि यसले भित्रका सानसाना नलीहरूमा पनि रगत फुट्ने सम्भावना बढ्न सक्छ र जसले गर्दाखेरि ब्लिडिङ हुन सक्छ। अब यो ब्लिडिङ भइसकेपछि के गर्ने त? हामीले खाने औषधि कस्तो छ भन्ने कुरा विशेष महत्त्व दिनुपर्ने हुन्छ। सर्वप्रथम त प्यारासिटामोल सबैभन्दा कमन। सिटामोलले तपाईको एन्टिपायरेटिक्स भनेको ज्वरो कम गर्ने काम पनि गर्छ, एनाल्जेसिक भनेको दुखाइ कम गर्ने काम पनि गर्छ र सँगैसँगै तपाईले जीवनजल र पानीको मात्रा पनि थुप्रै इन्टेक गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। र साथसाथै यसले प्रोटिन डिप्लिट गरिराखेको छ भने प्रोटिन रिच फुड हामीले खानुपर्छ। त्यसमा चाहिँ भेज र नन भेजका लागि थुप्रै खानाहरू छन्। यी सबै कुरा गरिराख्दाखेरि हामीले बारम्बार 24 घण्टा 48 घण्टाको दौरानमा चाहिँ एकपल्ट कम्प्लिट ब्लडको जाँच पनि गर्नुपर्छ र यो ब्लडको टेस्ट गर्दै गर्दाखेरि प्लेटलेट्सको काउन्ट कस्तो छ, घटेको छ वा छैन भन्ने कुराले चाहिँ डेङ्गुको हामी कुन स्टेजमा छौँ भन्ने कुरा पनि हामीलाई थाहा हुन्छ। र यदि तपाईँको प्लेटलेट्सको काउन्ट नर्मल छ, ब्लडको काउन्ट नर्मल छ भनेपछि तपाईँलाई डेङ्गुले त्यति हानि गरेको छैन र केही दिनको ज्वरोपछि र केही दिन तपाईँले खाएका मेडिसिनले गर्दाखेरि तपाईँ फेरि स्वस्थ हुन सक्नुहुन्छ। तर स्मरण के हुनु पर्यो भने डेङ्गुको रिइन्फेक्सन गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ यसको रिस्कहरू अलि बढेर पनि जाने गर्छ। त्यही भएर अब के गर्ने त? सबभन्दा राम्रो उपाय भनेको मच्छरले टोक्न नै दिनु भएन। त्यसका लागि के गर्ने? हामीले हरेकचोटि फोन गर्दै गर्दाखेरि हामीले सुन्ने गरेका छौँ हैन, आफ्नो वरिपरि भएका खाल्डाखुल्डी छन् भने तीहरू पुर्नु पर्यो, कुनै ठाउँमा पानी जमेर बसेको छ भने त्यो पानी पोख्नु पर्यो, किनभने मच्छरले त्यो ठाउँमा चाहिँ आफ्नो रिप्रोडक्सन गरेर रेप्लिका बढाउँदै लैजान्छ। र यसका साथसाथै मच्छरहरूको लागि झुल प्रयोग गर्नु पर्यो। र यदि दिउँसो तपाईँ ट्राभल गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ भने हामीसँग अहिले त मस्किटो रिपेलेन्ट भनेर थुप्रै कुराहरू पनि पाउँछ। मैले नै एउटा प्याच लगाएर हिँडेको छु हैन, र हामीले ओडोमोस लगाउन सक्छौँ। जसरी हुन्छ मच्छरलाई टोक्न नदिने बित्तिकै हामी यो रोगबाट टाढा हुन सक्छौँ र हामीले यी सम्पूर्ण अघि भनेका लक्षणहरूबाट बच्न सक्छौँ। र यो थियो आज डेङ्गुको बारेमा हामीले थोरै चर्चा गऱ्यौँ र यसका बारेमा अर्को एउटा अन्तिम कुरा भनेर म अर्को प्रसङ्गमा लाग्नेछु। डेङ्गु भएको छ वा छैन यकिन गर्नका लागि चाहिँ ब्लड टेस्ट गरिहाल्नुहोस्, किनभने जति चाँडो हामीले टेस्ट गरेर यसको कन्फर्मेसन गर्छौँ त्यति चाँडो हामीलाई उपचार पद्धतिमा सहज पनि हुन्छ। र यो थियो डेङ्गु विशेष, किनभने हाम्रा साथीहरू सबैलाई थुप्रैजनालाई अझ काठमाडौँमा मात्रै पनि केसेसहरू बढ्दैछ र देशभरि 11,000 भन्दा बेसी केस भइसकेका कारणले गर्दाखेरि यो भन्न महत्त्वपूर्ण पनि थियो। र यसका साथसाथै अब डेङ्गुले भनेर मैले कति कुराहरू तर्साइसकेँ होला तपाईँहरूलाई, तर तपाईँहरूलाई मोटिभेट गर्नका लागि हामीसँग चाहिँ आजको कोट अफ द डे। Don't be pushed by your problems, be led by your dreams. Ralph Waldo Emerson. यो कोट पढ्दै गर्दाखेरि हरेक दिन जस्तै हामी अलिकति मोटिभेटेड हुने कुरा त छ, तर यसलाई हामीले अलिकति डिपली सोच्ने हो भने हामी समस्या नभएका को मान्छे छौँ होला र यस संसारमा? तपाईले आफ्नो वरिपरि हेर्नुहोस्, झ्यालबाट हेर्नुहोस् अथवा आफू ट्राभल गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ बसमा भएका हरेक मान्छेलाई हेर्नुहोस्, हरेकका आफ्ना आफ्ना प्रब्लम्सहरू छन्। सबैका समस्याहरू हुँदै गर्दाखेरि यदि ती समस्यामा हामी अल्झिएर बस्ने हो भने हामी कहिले पनि निकास पाउन सक्दैनौँ। तर तिनै मान्छेहरूलाई तपाईँले हेर्दै गर्दाखेरि तिनीहरू कहाँ जाँदैछन् त, आखिर केका लागि जाँदैछन् भन्दा त्यहाँ हरेकको पछाडि एउटा सपना हुन्छ। त्यो सपना साकार गर्नका लागि उहाँहरू ट्राभल गरिराख्नु भएको होला, सोचिराख्नु भएको होला अथवा त्यो समस्यासँग जुधिराख्नु भएको होला। यो नै लाइफको एउटा ब्युटिफुल पार्ट पनि हो। हामीले समस्यालाई बढी प्रायोरिटी दिने कि आफ्नो लक्ष्यलाई बढी प्रायोरिटी दिने भन्ने कुरा हो। र यो डिफिकल्ट कुरा गर्दै गर्दाखेरि आजको प्रसङ्ग म किन एक्लै होस्ट पनि छु भन्ने कुरा अर्को एउटा प्रसङ्ग पनि जोड्नेछु, जसले चाहिँ यस्तै असमान अवस्थाहरू, अझै असमान च्यालेन्जेसहरूलाई चाहिँ परास्त गर्दै कसरी आफूलाई इस्टाब्लिस गर्नुभएको छ भन्ने बारेमा पनि कुरा गर्नेछौँ। र यो एकदमै महत्त्वपूर्ण किन छ भने तपाईँका जति धेरै समस्या र जति धेरै तपाईँले ट्याकल गर्नुहुन्छ त्यति नै राम्रो तपाईँको हाइट बढ्दै जान्छ र त्यति नै सफल तपाईँ हुँदै जानुहुन्छ जीवनमा। यो मोटिभेसनल कोट सँगै चाहिँ आज मैले बिहान आउँदै गर्दादेखि हिजोदेखि पनि अलिअलि सिमसिम बर्सात पनि भइराखेको थियो र काठमाडौँको मौसम अझै घट्दैछ। मैले हिजो पनि भने सिरक ओढ्नुपर्ने अवस्था काठमाडौँमा आउन थालिसक्यो। यो टेम्परेचर घट्दैछ र अब दसैँको माहौल पनि आउँदैछ। अहिले देशभरिको हाम्रो मौसमको अवस्था के छ त्यो हेरौँ। र आजको मौसम हामीले हेरिसकेका छौँ। काठमाडौँको तापक्रम 27 डिग्री सेल्सियस। मैले भने जस्तै केही चिसो बढ्न थालेको छ काठमाडौँमा। यो एभरेस्ट टेम्परेचर थियो भने मैले अहिलेको मौसम हेर्दै गर्दाखेरि देशमा आंशिक बदली भइराखेको छ, विभिन्न क्षेत्रमा वर्षातहरू पनि भइराखेको छ भने तराईको भूभागमा विशेष गरी वर्षा कम हुन थालेको छ र यसका साथसाथै हिमाली भेग, आज म विशेष गरी हिमाली भेगमा फोकस गरिराखेको छु। हिमाली भेगमा वर्षा पनि भइराखेको छ, त्यहाँको मौसम पनि अरू ठाउँभन्दा च्यालेन्जिङ र हामीले यो लामो समयदेखि नै भन्दै आइरहेका छौँ हिमाली र पहाडी क्षेत्रमा बर्सात बढी भइराखेको छ अथवा त्यहाँको मौसम चाहिँ अलिकति जटिल छ भन्छौँ। र यो हिमाल हेर्दाखेरि जति सुन्दर छ त्यो हिमालसम्म पुग्न त्यतिकै कठिन छ। हामीले अझै विशेष गरी नेपालको उत्तरी भाग हेर्ने हो भने पाकिस्तानदेखि नेपालसम्म जुन हिमालयन रेन्ज देखिन्छ त्यो रेन्ज टाढाबाट हेर्दाखेरि अति नै सुन्दर देखिन्छ र विश्वबाट विभिन्न मुलुकबाट नेपाललाई हिमाली देशको हिमालहरूको देश भनेर पनि चिन्ने गर्छन् भने ती हिमालहरू आरोहण गर्नका लागि पनि थुप्रै मानिसहरू आउँछन्। र आज म यो बारेमा किन बढी चर्चा गर्दैछु भने आज हामीसँग एउटा यस्तो गेस्ट हुनुहुन्छ जसले यी हिमालहरूलाई आफ्नो गन्तव्य बनाउनु भएको छ र संसारमा इतिहास रच्न सफल हुनुभएको छ। उहाँको परिचय दिनुभन्दा अगाडि म तपाईहरुलाई एउटा छोटो कमर्सियल ब्रेकमा लिएर जानेछु। ब्रेकपछि हामी स्वागत गर्नेछौँ हाम्रो आजको गेस्टलाई। ब्रेकपछि पुनः स्वागत छ गुड मर्निङ नेपालमा। मैले आज अलिकति चर्चा जोडेको थिएँ हिमालसँग रिलेटेड र यो चर्चा गर्दै गर्दाखेरि म आजको हाम्रो विशेष गेस्टलाई म हाम्रो स्टेजमा बोलाउन चाहन्छु। उहाँको नाम हो वास्फिया नजरीन अनि उहाँ बङ्गलादेशबाट हुनुहुन्छ र उहाँको परिचय गर्दै गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ उहाँ यस्तो व्यक्ति हुनुहुन्छ जसले संसारका 7वटा महाद्वीपका सबैभन्दा अग्ला चुचुराबाट संसारलाई हेर्नुभएको छ, अर्थात् 7 समिटलाई सक्सेसफुल्ली उहाँले आरोहण गरिसक्नु भएको छ र हामीसँग हुनुहुन्छ वास्फिया नजरीन। वास्फिया, प्लिज वेलकम टु द शो गुड मर्निङ नेपाल।
Thank you so much for having me, Santosh.
So first of all, I'm so grateful that I'm sitting with someone who have seen the world from the top of the mountains of each continent.
Thank you.
Since this is the Good Morning show and we'd like to let all our viewers know what is the morning of a mountaineer is like.
Well, it depends, but we mostly climb during the night actually. Yeah. But if I think of morning, when you're in the camp inside the tent, the alarm clock is the sound of boiling water because that's the first task that you do. Get some snow and then melt it because everything depends on that. You have to drink water and then even for breakfast you need to boil water first.
So when I'm talking about the mountains and when I was watching those mountains during the weather forecast today, I could imagine myself being in the base camp of different mountains. I haven't been to the peak, but I have been to the base camp and I know how difficult it is even just to breathe there, just to take one step.
Did you go to Everest base camp?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah. I've been there. So you have been to the summit of all 7 continents. How does it feel?
Well, I've been to other mountains as well. I think every mountain to me is a pilgrimage. It's like a journey. I was very lucky to have learned directly from the Sherpa people and the Tibetans. So it's a very different philosophy with, how they climb. Even as a Bangladeshi, we're predominantly a Muslim country, but we still regarded the mountains as God, the throne of gods and goddesses, the Himalayas. So it's a journey where we go with reverence, not to conquer it, but to surrender. Whereas in the West, if you hear of most mountaineers, it's more of a sport, right?
Yeah, well, talking to you, I can feel the spiritual aspect of you and how spiritual you are. I was going to ask you the same thing. Being a Bangladeshi woman, which is a country where there are no big mountains, I would say, how do you take this challenge or take this goal of conquering the world through the mountains?
We are a river-centric country, so I grew up literally in water. But it's a very long story, but in my college years, I was very lucky to have come across, first of all, going back, Nepal has been my second home since I was a little kid. My first trip to anywhere outside Bangladesh when I was only 9 months old was Nepal.
Wow.
I have more seals in my passport of this country than any other country.
Wow, that's a good news for us.
I've overstayed here because we are only allowed 6 months maximum. So many years I've overstayed here, and the immigration officers even told me that you need to find a Nepali husband. Just don't do this anymore. So I've had that contact with Nepal since I was a kid. And we're only an hour away, actually, by
exactly.
flight.
It's 27 kilometers distance from the border of Nepal.
Yeah, I wish we had a whole bridge, over India to come here. Anyway, and then in college, I was very lucky to have gotten this scholarship to study how women were using art as therapy, and that's how I got very involved with Tibetan refugees who were in Nepal and in many parts of the world, India. And it was an eye-opener for me at the age of barely 21.
So you were into which faculty?
Psychology and studio art.
So I'm very much concerned. I'm going to talk about your childhood.
Yeah.
How was it? And also, how did you completely switch from the psychology to mountaineering?
Right. Okay, so going back to my childhood, I had a very kind of volatile, my parents divorced when I was only 12, and then my family separated. No, that's fine. It was those few years in my teenage life was very tragic, but when I look back now, I wouldn't change it because that's what made me who I am today. And so overnight I had to think of education, where I was gonna stay. Long story short, it made me very wanting to be very independent, and only way I knew how to is to educate myself. And I told my relative my aunt who was raising me at that time to teach me English and put me in an English medium school so that I could go internationally to study and be on my own. So since college life, I've been on my own, and I'm proud to say I'm a self-made woman. And now that's how I gained the independence, right? Because women in my country and many parts of South Asia, we're kind of doomed for marriage, things, and
bounded by the society.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then when I was in college, I came across these women I was talking about, and then eventually ended up learning a lot about Buddhism, the concepts of Buddhism, and that's what brought me here in a bigger way. I ended up, I lived in Kathmandu and Namche for over 10 years, back and forth. I'm 40, so I know just to put things into perspective. Almost 40, I'll be 40 in October. But and I was involved in human rights work for a long time in nonprofits, working to stop violence against women, both in Bangladesh, in Nepal, and in Greater South Asia, with indigenous people, environmental rights. So I've had that career for 12 years while I was also climbing mountains. But at that time, it was more like, oh yeah, I'm in Nepal, let's go climb a 5,000 meter peak. You guys are the luckiest people on earth because the Himalayas is in your backyard, right?
Yeah, I think so. After being to a lot of countries, I think sometimes I'm really blessed to be in this country because of the mountains and all the natural things that we have. Apart from being a mountaineer, you're a social activist. So you were also working in environmental conservation. You're advocating for the women's health and women's rights. So which identity you like the most about yourself?
I try not to think about it. I also have, I'm an educator. I think right now at the place that I'm in life, I feel like my work is to tell the stories of women. So for the past few years, I've been working in television, and I'm also a National Geographic adventurer and explorer. And what
I've read that somewhere.
What I realized is internationally, if our stories are told, it's told by a very privileged group of, white male, if I may say, or a certain lens. So I felt like I had a duty to change that type of storytelling. And so for the last couple of years, I've been trying from all media, whether it's a podcast, writing a book, or TV, to just tell our stories as it is. So I've been involved I just actually started another book project. It's a graphic novel on K2 that I just climbed this summer.
So we're coming to that part. And as you said, you're a good storyteller, and you are trying to tell these stories to a lot of people to inspire them. Let me know the first experience of being in the mountain. I know, like, you've been to the different parts and you have a series of experiences, but I think the first one is always very special. And I don't know, like, if people know about that, how did you feel when you were first time in the mountain, whichever it is?
Okay, so when I was growing up, we have in Chittagong, there's a part of the country called Chittagong, though it's hills. And to me as a kid, though, that was my mountain, you know, and my first mountain or hill was something called Chandranath Pahar, which is in Chittagong. And
so what is the altitude of that?
You're going to laugh. But as a kid, it's in the thousands, or in feet.
Okay.
So our highest one, I don't want you to laugh.
It's fine, because you have the massive oceans around, and, you know, which we don't have. That's completely good.
Yeah, but so from a child's perspective, that was a mountain, and there was a temple on top of the hill. And so I climbed that when all my older relatives were struggling in the back. So I still have memory of that going, because I wanted to reach that temple. Again, it's, you know, there's a spiritual side of it that I wasn't going to, you know, I wasn't going because I wanted to reach the summit. It was because there was some kind of
there was
refuge up there. So, but then later in university, I went to Scotland and the Highlands over there, and just in UK, I don't know if people are familiar with Scotland territory, but those were hills also. And then in college, I started coming to the Himalayas. And once you fall in love with the Himalayas, you're doomed for life.
Yeah, so there's no coming back from
No coming back from there. And even, like, I just flew in from Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh. Like, every day that I spend there, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm doing a lot of stuff, but my mind is actually
always
in the mountains.
So I've read that you have climbed K2 recently. We'll come to that part. You have been on the top of the world, Everest Base Camp. Also, you have been to Antarctica, the highest mountain of Antarctica. I want to know something more about it, because Antarctica is already so cold. It's already just being at Antarctica is a challenge for a lot of people. And you were there, and you were on the highest mountain of Antarctica. Let's come from there. How was it? Right.
So going from Bangladesh, that was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Back then, so for example, like I was saying, when I was doing the 7 summits, I didn't know any person who looked like me, a woman, brown woman, doing the 7 summits. And so there was not a lot of information, and we even didn't have a diplomatic relationship with any country in South America, because you have to go to that part of territory, because Antarctica is huge, right? So depending on which part of Antarctica you go, so you have to go from the adjoining
relative
territory.
Country. Yeah, I know.
So I had to go through South America in Chile, and it was, you know, just the journey to get to Antarctica was one trip, and then from the place that the plane drops you to get to the mountain was another, and then to climb the mountain. It was almost 1.5 months for me, the whole journey, and because Bangladesh is so hot, you know, my trainers told me that don't go directly, so I plan to train in winter
so
Canada.
You need to acclimatize just with the cold this time, not just with the altitude. But
So I planned 2 weeks before Antarctica in western part of Canada. And Patrick Morrow, who's the first person to have done the 7 summits, was my mentor at that time. And so in his backyard, because it's freezing winter, and which is summer in Antarctica when it's winter in Canada. So I flew in from there, and you know, it was just, again, it doesn't feel like Earth. It feels like and it's untouched, most of the territories. And there's no time. It feels like you're in a different planet after you've moved on from the first place where people get dropped. And it was super expensive as well to get there, just the logistics and stuff. So the fundraising part of it was another whole mountain to climb. But once I got there, you know, it's daytime, like there's sunlight 6 months. So after almost 3 days, you feel like, because there is no, even at nighttime you wear sunglasses, nighttime, but there's no night, because the sun is so strong, and it's called the midnight sun. So you're constantly working in day, and that kind of messes up with your mind a little bit, because I still remember when I returned and my first night in Chile in the hotel, when I saw nighttime, I freaked out because it's just
so you've been there for like 2 months or more?
No, 1.5 months, because my climb had finished, but we were waiting for the plane to come, and we were stuck for 2 weeks on the ground. So that was a whole nother thing. But I would love to go back anytime, because I haven't felt so out of the world.
Yeah, because the reason I asked you about Antarctica is I have watched few documentaries of Antarctica. That place is very challenging. It's extreme of Earth, I consider that way.
Right.
And there are a lot of countries who have been trying to colonize a little part of Antarctica. So I think that is the reason you have to go through different parts of the country just to make sure that which part you want to go in Antarctica, right? Of course, Antarctica is the difficult territory, and then going to the top of it was the most difficult one. Yeah,
no, no, because it was so when I reached the summit, I still remember that we were looking, my friend who's also a guide there, he was saying that, oh, Asia is that way. This place is that way, and we were like, and it's all white, you know, just white, as far as you can see. But the summit is very short, and my previous summit was, in between I climbed some shorter mountains, but my previous big summit was Everest.
Okay, so I'm coming to that part.
So it felt very low, you know, like I was like, oh wow, just because you don't travel in dead zone, you know, which is above 26,000, you know. So in terms of the journey and the distance and the temperature, it was because we were dealing with temperature on a daily basis that we faced on the summit of Everest. So on the daily, that struggle is hard, and you also have to like carry a lot of weight in your sledge. So the training was very different, and I still remember I put on fat before I left, because people told me that your lipid profile, so we have muscle content and fat content, right? So I had to increase the lipid profile so I could survive in the cold. Okay, so the training was very different for Antarctica.
Yeah, I can just, when you're talking about those views, I can only imagine that, how it was. Now you talk about Mount Everest. When did you conquer it first?
I don't feel like I've conquered it. I feel like I've surrendered to it. So Chomulungma, which is the local name, Mother Goddess, a lot of locals call it that. So this was, again, 10 years ago, before it was this crowded. And I have been to the north side of base camp, the Tibet side. Okay. Back
so you climbed from Tibet? Or
no, I climbed to the top from Nepal side, but I have had travels around Everest since I was in my 20s. So the mountain was very special.
So it's just like we going to some random places, and you know, like, okay, I'll try going from the other route. So that is how you have been observing Mount Everest, from the northern part, from Nepal. And
northern part was more for work, because I was working with Tibetans, so I went to the base camp only. But I always wanted to climb from Nepal side, because it's considered a bit more harder because of the Khumbu icefall. And at that time, I climbed with Nima Girman Sherpa, who unfortunately passed later in a tragic accident, not in my climb, but yeah, it was, again, as cliched as it sounds, it was probably, I was only 29 at that time, but I was, it was one of the most spiritual journey for me, because, you know, like I said, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Myo Sang Langma is the goddess that resides in her, and you actually do a puja to get permission from her. So the passage is safe for us. And it transformed me completely, you know, the journey up and down. And it was just me, you know, representing a single woman from Bangladesh. And you know, it was just such a long journey. And
yeah, I can relate that, because I was at the base camp and I could see the mountain doctors that they call to the Sherpas.
Yeah.
And they're walking in those ice falls. Yeah. And then going to the first camp. Yeah. It was during the Everest marathon. I was one of the doctors in the team, and while watching them, I could feel like how vast and how big this nature and how strong it is. Yeah. And we're just nothing in front of the nature, right? So just like you said, it's not conquering, it's just surrendering to those people. Majestic things, I would say. What was it like being on the top of the Mount Everest as a Bangladeshi woman?
Yeah, so I went through a lot of obstacles. So, for example, my Camp 3, which was on Lhotse Face, it was entirely destroyed right before the summit push. So there was zero chance for me to summit because, you know, once that camp is destroyed, you have to go all the way down, carry all that, and there were only very short summit windows, which is, you know, just because of the weather. So we were kind of approaching the end of it, and physically I probably climbed to like dead zone level 4 times before even getting to the summit. And then, like, I can't tell you how, but I felt like a really strong goddess energy pulling me from dead zone, which is South Col above 26,000 feet. And I just
almost
knew.
8,000.
Huh?
Yeah, almost 8,000.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, in South Col, I had really crazy dreams. And you don't really sleep. It's a dream state anyway. And my appetite got very strong, which is also abnormal because in high altitude you lose appetite.
You don't feel like eating anything.
Yeah, and then Nima was telling me, what's wrong with you? I said, I don't know. I just feel like I have support. So just the last push on the summit was very. I felt like I had this newfound energy, and this needed to happen. But on the way just to the summit, I crossed 7 dead bodies, and 5 of them were people from that same season. And, you know, when you see that at that altitude, the first thought that comes to your mind is like, am I going to be next? So mentally it was very crazy. And then when I reached the summit, the sun was just coming out. And it was very early summit, 6:26. And I remember taking off my mask and just like looking at sunrise from the top of the world. And I was just crying, and Nima was like, you're going to freeze your eyes, so like cover. But I couldn't stop because all your emotions come up. But there's just so much emotions, but the overriding emotion was gratitude. And I felt very grateful to be alive, and just like I felt like a tiny dot in the whole expanse of the Himalayas.
So that is the moment when we realize what is our value, and what is the essence of life. How grateful we are to have this life and to breathe each time and to witness the world, right?
Yeah, and you know, but at the same time I realized how powerful we are, and you know, we have responsibility. So it was kind of like a reawakening, and I was like looking at the bottom, and I was like, as soon as I go down, this feeling is gonna like get mixed up in the chaos of so-called civilization. And I was like, you know, and by the time I came down, I think because it took 2 days to come down and you have to be super fast, it was also another whole transformation. And if I may share, I had really long hair at that time. And someone told me that, you know, in many yogic tradition, your hair contains all your wisdom. So that's where everything lies. So I had promised to Chomulungma that if I get to the summit, I'll give that. So I actually, when I did a whole ceremony when I came down, and I chopped off my hair like army cut. And I did a whole puja with Nima, and I surrendered, and we burnt it, and you know, just gave it as an offering. And I was really like, it was when I look at life back, 29 before, 29 was a different me, and 21 after was a different me.
You.
The mountain really
so we have
shifted
been
me.
talking about a lot of things that might be inspiring to a lot of people, but we're going to watch few photos of you. And also we're going to talk about Mount Ketu, which is considered as one of the most difficult mountain to expedite. So we're going to talk about it, but it's time for a short commercial break. We'll be right back. And after the break, we're going to watch the photos, and also we'll talk about those things. Breakपछि पुनः स्वागत छ Good Morning Nepalमा. So we are talking about expediting the mountains, and we're yet to watch the photos that you took in those extreme of climate. So we have some of the photos, we'll talk about them, we'll watch them now, and also we'll talk about how it was. Before going to that, I would just like to know about Ketu. So when did you did that?
This summer. So I reached the summit 22nd July. But
recently?
So yeah, just this past July. But I was, climbing K2 was one thing, and climbing K2 with one of the craziest team on the planet, which is, I'm very proud to say, from Nepal, Nimsdai and Mingma Tenzin Sherpa and Mingma David Sherpa.
So you're in the same team of Nimsdai.
Yeah. So that's, me with Mingma Dorji Sherpa raising the Bangladesh flag on the summit of K2. It's one of the deadliest mountains on the planet, and so it was one of the hardest expeditions that I've done, and I wouldn't have done it with any other team. Nirmal Purja doesn't need any introduction in Nepal or anywhere. So just in my team, so there were other clients, of course, but and I climbed with a separate Sherpa, Mingma Dorji Sherpa, but in my team infrastructure, 5 of the K2 winter heroes were there, including 3 of the ones I just mentioned. So mentally, I knew that I was safe with my Nepali brothers, and this is.
So this photo.
This is so. Anyone who knows about K2 is a very pyramid-like mountain, and there's very few flat places. So the summit is actually one of the very few flat places. So that's me entering the summit.
So just before the summit, I think this is the time when Nimsdai was cheering you.
Yeah, so I met him exactly around this space, and he did it without supplementary oxygen. So
and he was waiting there for all the climbers to get to the top.
So he did it without oxygen, both in winter and summer now. Which is another world record. So when I was approaching this place, I heard someone screaming, "I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of you," and I look up and it was Nims waiting, Wow. That's when my respect went for him further, because very few, barely anyone would wait for clients, especially when you're climbing without supplementary oxygen. And he waited for everyone, to reach the summit. And he led from the front instead of,
Yeah, so he's differently made.
Yeah,
and you guys as well.
Yeah, so climbing with Nims and with his speed was a whole nother journey, and I'm very, very grateful.
So I also got to know that this was the only time when you guys could make it in one shot.
Well, yeah,
to the summit, right?
Yeah. Well, there are so many mountaineers coming back to K2 over years after years, and they still haven't reached the summit. So I was very lucky that we made it all the way from base camp to the top at one go.
Yeah, I've heard about K2 that even when you are sleeping, there are like big rocks that falls to your tent.
So we had to wear helmets.
Helmets even while sleeping.
Yeah, but you barely sleep. But inside the tent,
so resting, I would
and then
say.
One rock did come into our tent and teared through the tent and came in right by my teammates' head.
Wow. And this photo?
This was 10 years ago on the summit of Chomolungma or Everest. You can see the Nepal flag. Actually, in the 2 hills that you can see, there are 2 Buddha statues that are inside that. And the logo I'm holding is the campaign that I ran called Bangladesh on 7 Summits, Women Reaching Heights. So my whole journey was to show how far women in Bangladesh have come, because so many of us climb, women in, not just in Bangladesh, but all of South Asia, we climb so many mountains without having to step on one. Wow. So it was kind of like a symbolic journey of what women go through. This is to show how steep, this is like a 90-degree angle on the Black Pyramid, which is one of the technical parts of K2. Okay. And yeah, so K2 is super technical, and there's mixed climbing. So this is just one of the parts of K2 to show how.
It seems so dangerous. Like, and when you were at that place, you were trying to catch some breath. And it's so difficult to push your legs.
There is no place on K2 that you can really rest. And so from the left here, it's Mingma Tenzin Sherpa, Mingma David Sherpa, and Nimsdai. And so this is the puja that we had for K2 in base camp. And like I was saying, it's a very, the process is to surrender and ask seek permission. And those who may not know, in winter, K2 winter record that this team did, Mingma Tenzin on the left was, single-handedly he did the rope fixing all the way from Bottleneck, one of the most technical parts of, or dangerous parts of K2 to the summit.
And this photo?
It's very hard to get sponsorship in Bangladesh, and I've been doing, these are all the women from the company Renata that did sponsor the K2, and I've been involved with women's work for so many years. And so and when I work with women now, it's like each of them have a K2 in their life, or Everest, not the physical mountain, but so it's my work has been focused. So my work has been in whatever kind of corporation work or consultancy work I do is to help people or women or young people to find how to climb those mountains.
Super inspiring. And this photo?
So I'm sure he doesn't need any introduction. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This was also in 2012. This is when I chopped off my hair, so it grew back a little bit. And I had taken pictures of. I had brought some water from summit of Everest and offered it because they also, Tibetans regard the mountain as holy, and Myosang Langma lives there. And the photos are of Tibet from the summit. I took a zoom lens and took as many pictures I could because he hasn't been able to go back, and just to thank, because if I think of anyone who is responsible for my mountaineering career, it's the Tibetans and the Sherpa and the Nepali people. So my ultimate gratitude to them.
Wow! So it was a big honor to talk to you regarding all these things, and the way you have been working on a spiritual aspect and also for the humankind, I would say. The experience of being on the top of all the summits, and then also working for the people. The thing that you said about every woman have to go through the hardship of climbing K2 or Everest each day in their life, and you're working to help them out. So I'm really, really glad to have you here and talking these things with you. And we also explored a lot of mountains through photos and through talks. And I am sure that you guys were imagining it in your mind how difficult and how blessed it was to be in that journey with her. So is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience before departing?
Well, I have realized through my short journey on this planet that life, and I've had a lot of loss in my life, and I think it's important to realize that our time on this planet is very short, and we should all fetch for our dreams, no matter how hard they may seem, because anything is truly possible, and I've lived that over and over. And so just, wherever you are, if you have a dream, go for it. Don't listen to society or what other people may say. And all the best, and thank you so much for having me on this show. It was an honor to speak to you.
Thank you so much for your time in this show, Good Morning Nepal. र जसरी उहाँले भन्नुभएको छ, हामीहरुको लाइफलाई ग्रान्टेड लिनु हुँदैन। हाम्रो लाइफमा च्यालेन्जेसहरु जति पनि आउन सक्छ, आजको कोटमा पनि हामीले कुरा गरेका थियौं, र जीवनमा जति धेरै चुनौतीहरु आउँछन् त्यति नै हामी सक्सेसफुल हुन सक्छौं, र हामीले पाएको यो गिफ्ट लाइफ भनेको एउटा वरदान हो। यो वरदानलाई चाहिँ हामीले सकेसम्म एउटा ड्रिमले ड्राइभ गरेर त्यहाँसम्म पुग्नका लागि हामीले स्ट्रगल गर्नुपर्छ, र त्यसपछिको यात्रा भनेको जीवनमा सक्सेसको यात्रा हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ। र यस्तै रमाइला प्रसंगहरु हामीले कुराकानी गर्यौं, र आज विशेष गरी माउन्टेनको बारेमा कुरा गर्यौं। संसारका 7 वटै कन्टिनेन्टका 7 वटा समिटमा पुग्नु भएको व्यक्तित्व हामीसँग हुनुहुन्थ्यो। उहाँसँगको यो संवादपछि निश्चय पनि तपाईहरुको गुड फ्राइडे आज स्टार्ट भइसकेको छ, र आजको फ्राइडेको लागि तपाईले थुप्रै सेलिब्रेसनका प्लानहरु गर्नुभएको होला, भोलि शनिबार पनि सेलिब्रेट गर्नुभएको होला, तर आइतबार फेरि हामी तपाईहरुलाई गुड मर्निङ नेपालको शो लिएर आउनेछौं। तबसम्मका लागि बिदा दिनुहोस्, धन्यवाद।